Okay, this deck is Windows Azure. Where are we now? So thank you for joining us here at Tech Days. I don't even know what time we finish. What time is this session due to finish? 45, 11, 12? Okay. Okay, so we've got 63 minutes minus a few seconds, and we'll see how we go. It is a rather long deck, so I was actually hoping for those extra 10 minutes, but if we do run short towards the end without Q&A time, I'll be right here. I managed to find my keys, which I lost at the end of the keynote. So I will be here to answer any questions you may have if we don't get a formal sort of broad audience one. But given the size of the theater here, it'd probably be hard to hear some of you guys up the back. So my name's Nick Harris. I'm a senior technical evangelist. I'm joined by Scott Klein, one of my colleagues at Microsoft. Do you want to stand up and say hi, Scott? Everybody. So Scott focuses on Windows Azure SQL database and also Windows Azure storage. So he's going to do some demos with SQL Azure for us. I work in Redmond, as does Scott. You can find me on Cloud Nick and Scott on SQL Scott. Let's get started. This is a slide I forgot to delete. So these are not the droids you're looking for. Just imagine this is not there. But since it is here, may as well click on it because I believe everything happens for a reason, right? Hopefully my machine is not going to crash here. It might be Internet Explorer. Let's go to this. This is sort of interesting. It's one of the things I wanted to pull up. Anyhow, bring up the deck. Come on, Nick. What are you doing there? I don't use that browser. All right. Oh yeah, that would be an issue for a cloud-based presentation. There we go. What do we got? Okay. So let's do this. Sorry that we're a bit scattered. We sort of come right in on the back of that keynote there. So not a very fun start for me. Okay. With the power of the interwebs, we now have access to MSDN. So that link was actually something I was looking at because it's like, man, I've been working at Microsoft for almost 2 years now, and there's been so many updates to Windows Azure. It's almost amazing to see that it's coming out so frequently. So this is like a list of what's new in Windows Azure. It was last updated December 3. So when I was looking at the abstract for this and going, I have to do the Windows Azure overview plus show you everything new in the last year. I'm like, how am I going to do this in 1 hour? So I figured I'd call out some of the new things released on some of our services as we go throughout it, and perhaps demo some of them as I can. But for the main sort of flow, we're going to be looking at Azure as an overview. It is a level 200 talk, so there's not as much code as I generally like to write in sessions. But you can see here that basically every month, November, there's so many updates that you have to go and read Scott Goo's blog in this case. October coming down, big updates to Windows Azure mobile services, a lot updates to Windows Azure websites, really cool one there being .NET Framework 4.5. But if I keep scrolling here, this is really the point that I wanted to make, is we're executing using a very agile fashion at the moment, so we're actually releasing updates to different services almost every month. And with that comes, new functionality, plus also, occasional bug fixes if there's a bug. But at the end of the day, what it means to you as developers is that you've got a platform that's evolving and that we're investing in, and you're not going to be waiting the traditional 6 months, to a year kind of time span for that new feature that you're really waiting for to come in and be useful to you. So let's return to the deck, and I'll delete that so I never have to do that again. So this was what I was looking at. How can we fit all this in one session? And the answer is we can't, but we'll try and get all of it in. I have prioritized it, how I'd like to cover it, minus the notification hubs. That one should be flipped at the bottom. But if I were someone new to the Windows Azure platform, this is how I would tackle it. That was if I wanted to learn, say, the breadth of it. But typically what you do is you just choose the service or the building block that's available within Windows Azure that you require to be able to go out and do the task that you're trying to achieve. If you're building a website, start with Windows Azure Websites. If you're building a mobile backend, start with mobile services. If you need perhaps a bit more power for your website, or you need to go and configure the OS and install perhaps some IIS extensions or some third-party application, move up from websites to cloud services. If you need total control of the OS and you don't want us to manage it at all for you, go to virtual machines. Windows Azure Storage is one of our storage systems that we'll look at. We've got SQL Database. We've got the Windows Azure Store, which is new. It allows third parties to essentially provide services that they can sell to developers to use I'm sort of talking faster or slower than I'm thinking. Sorry, it's a bit of adrenaline from the last session. Long story short, the store allows you to get turnkey services like MySQL DBs, MongoDBs, SendGrid for email, Pusher if you want a WebSocket implementation for sort of real-time messaging and eventing. But one thing I'd like to say to you guys is if you work for a vendor or a provider or a company and you build out services that developers can consume, the Windows Azure Store is something you should consider utilizing as a means to essentially scale out the breadth of your target audience for that particular product. So at the moment, we're taking on board partners who want to integrate with the store to provide solutions to developers. Service Bus notifications hubs, I'll talk to them if we get a chance to get there, but I'll refer you to Clement's session. And media services, I can show you a demo of that. Here are some of the related sessions, which will do the next level down on what we're doing today. So the first one, Jim Wang, he's a senior test engineer on ASP.NET team. So he's talking about the future of ASP.NET. Cloud enable your Windows Store apps with mobile services. I wouldn't listen to that guy. I don't trust anything he says. That would be me at 2:30. Building scalable, robust solutions with Service Bus. Clemens Vasta's definitely a good watch there. Straight after mine, which is good. I don't have to compete for people with him. But if you want to see notification hubs, that's the place to do it. On Thursday, we've got Scott doing Kung Fu migration of Windows Azure SQL Database. Today, specifically, if you read... Who reads Scott Goo's blog? Okay, a lot of you guys. Did you read the update he gave yesterday? I believe it was. Like he posted yesterday or the day before. No? No one? Basically, we announced some stuff around Windows Azure AD there and portal integration of that. So if you want to see that kind of thing, you should go to Martin's session tomorrow. Real-time web applications with ASP.NET Web API and SignalR. That'll be another good one, particularly if you're building sort of gaming or messaging solutions. And this deep dive on storage is probably useful if you're trying to build some high-throughput systems where you really need to start considering the design of, say, your table store or your blob storage to ensure that you're going to hit the upper thresholds of our storage account throughput targets, which I do have in this deck. We can talk about them. So overall, Windows Azure is designed to be flexible, open, and rock solid. I'm not sort of obliged to do the muscle thing, but recently with all the travel, I've lost all my muscles. We've got a global footprint. Everything in blue there that you see is essentially a data center where you can deploy your compute or storage assets to, or SQL assets in the case of Scott there. The green ones are some of the CDN nodes that we have worldwide. There's actually 24 of them. Let's try this special button click. That's just not cool, is it? It's taken over my default browser. I'm not going to combat it. I'll just leave it there. But what I'd like to show you here is the rest of the nodes, and if we scroll down, you'll probably see one that's close to where we are. So there's Amsterdam, Dublin, sort of a bit further away. But the CDN essentially allows us to push content or have content pulled out to these edge nodes from our storage accounts, thus enabling us to reduce the latency for our end users to consume that content. So rather than perhaps having to go from here to Dublin to pull down a media asset, that request routed through the CDN is going to only go to Amsterdam, which performance-wise should be a lot better, should reduce the latency for your end users. So that's the CDN piece. Let's keep going here. 99.95% monthly SLA, so across compute storage, but SQL is 99.9. If we keep going, you pay for only what you use. There are other subscription offers where you get discounts. So So let's jump into the 101 demo. What is Windows Azure and where do you start? So here I'm going to go to windowsazure.com, and this is our entry point. There are these quick links here, which I don't typically use. One of interest to many people is pricing. They've got a decent pricing calculator here for each of the things we're sort of going to talk about today. And you can come along and you can sort of go and see, you know, if I've got a solution and I require a 1 gig DB, then how much is that going to cost me? And $9.99 a month, that's in US dollars. And you can, of course, change the pricing tier here somewhere. There it is. What do we use here? Euros? So $7.44 a month for a gig of SQL DB. But essentially, if you're trying to get a rough feeling for how much this is going to cost, if you're paying full pay-as-you-go pricing, that's what the calculator's for. There's a number of member offers. If you're an MSDN subscriber, NPM member, BizSpark, or Website Spark member, you actually get Windows Azure benefit as part of that. So we give you essentially Windows Azure that's worth a lot of money to go and utilize in your solutions. And the typical question I get asked here is, can we actually use them for commercial production solutions? And the answer is yes, you can use these MSDN subscriber offers for commercial use. If we have a look at what you can sort of, who here has an MSDN subscription? Okay, most of you. Who's using your Azure benefits? Okay, probably about 20% of you. So this is something really worth taking away, particularly if you want to go and explore this space, prototype in this space, understand how it works. In a professional subscription, you get 375 hours of small compute, get CDN transactions, data, storage, you get SQL down here, 1 gig, this one's 5 gig. Visual Studio Ultimate, obviously you get more Azure for being an Ultimate subscriber. But end of the day, take it away that you should come and look at this, and it's a good way to get started with Windows Azure. Before I joined Microsoft, I did this through BizSpark, so BizSpark members get the same as MSDN Ultimate there. So coming back up, the next sort of real place that you want to see here is perhaps the documentation. So if we come in here, you can see that we've got documentation on each of our services. So we're starting to sort of try to categorize things into compute, data, app, and network. So if you wanted to learn about mobile services, you click in, and then you're at the Mobile Services Hub. Essentially there you've got access to a number of step-by-step tutorials and links out at the top level to all of the relevant material, reference articles on MSDN, forums for questions, samples, and downloads. And this theme you'll find is consistent throughout almost all of the services that we link to here, and if they're not, they'll eventually conform to this same layout because that's part of the rework we're doing for the website. Developer centers are a little bit different. You can click in. Well, that one's the same. Let's go to .NET, and let's click in. Again, the same. They rolled out an update recently, actually. But one of the things I like to show you here is basically the tutorials. Clicking into one of these guys, you'll see that this is actually guidance. Where'd the tutorials go? There they are. Scenario-based tutorials. Select one, and it'll be a step-by-step guide of how you go out and build. In this case, it's creating a website that connects to MongoDB on a virtual machine in Windows Azure. So that's that. The next thing that you do is, if you're not using an MSDN subscription, you can use a free trial. But end of the day, the funnel point that you end up in is this Windows Azure portal. And this is where we'll spend some time today. So let's return to the deck here. Lost my spots here. There we go. Let's talk about Windows Azure websites. So Windows Azure websites is essentially a very lightweight, high-density web hosting solution for your websites. It's got a very quick deployment strategy. In about under a minute, you can deploy your website and have it up and running on a website where you can publicly hit it. You can build ASP, classic ASP, ASP.NET, Node.js apps, PHP apps, and such. We've got solutions there if you want to integrate with source control. Windows Azure Websites allows you to do that directly using Git or TFS. So essentially the flow that you've got there is create a website, create a website, link it to a Git account or a TFS account, check in the website, and then it will build and deploy it for you. Alternatively, you can publish directly to the website using Visual Studio if you're developing on a Windows system. If you're developing on Macs and those sorts of things, that's where sort of Git comes in and becomes a bit more sort of nice for developers on other platforms. So that's part of our open statement, is that we're trying to help developers not just in Microsoft stacks now, but we're trying to help developers across the board. You can start for free, so you get 10 websites for free. Now I can say I can't say it's forever, but I can say it is not end legally. So take away what you want from that, but essentially you'll get 10 free websites forever. And did I say I can't say forever? I can't say forever. I just said forever. So I'm going to get in trouble with LCA now when I get back. Read the fine print, don't listen to me, but you can start for free. Check it out. Let's do a demo. All right. So within the portal here, I seem to be very zoomed in. And I've probably got a few of these open from the last demo. Let's close some of this down. All right. These are all of our service offerings down the left here. You can see websites here. That's the one we're going to start with, and this is where you should start if you're building any type of web solution. To create a website, simple, click New. This theme is common throughout the Windows Azure portal. So for any service that you want to create, it's just a matter of clicking the top level item and then clicking in to the next level. We're going to select Website, and perhaps we'll start from Gallery. So there's two ways to do websites. We've got a gallery if you want to pull something that's been pre-built and ready to go and just deploy it to a website. So in this case, perhaps we'll do like a blogging engine. Internet. Okay. I'm hoping that is all good still. It seems to be a little bit laggy. That seems to work. Oh, there we go. I think maybe slow network. I don't know. But let's start by doing perhaps, say, a WordPress site. So as you know, WordPress is written in PHP. So this is an example of PHP on Azure. Let's call it QWERTY. Can you believe someone took that? QWERTY ASDF. I'm going to ask for audience participation here. So I don't have time to set this up. I'm going to deploy it. Then one of you guys can hijack it, put what you want on there, make sure it's reasonable to be on recorded content, and then we'll come back to it and see what you've done with that site in a minute. We select a deployment region. I'm going to go to North Europe. This subscription option is essentially just because I've got a couple subscriptions tied to this login. The MySQL database is going to be deployed to there as well. We need to agree. So this is ClearDB, one of our store partners that we've integrated into the wizard here. If I can click agree, click OK. What's going to happen now is it's going to go off and provision that WordPress site for us. So let's close that down. So does anyone have internet connection in here, or am I relying on myself to do this? No one? Do you have like mobile phones with GSM networks or something like that? Okay. In that case, I'll click into it once it's done. But while that's creating itself, let's look at the .NET Stack side of things. Let's say QWERTY U. Let's go to North Europe. Let's select Azure Demo. Let's select Create Website. Let's minimize this. So what's happened now is our WordPress site has spun up. We can click into this. Now, by default, all of the areas in Windows Azure have essentially a monitoring dashboard which shows, API calls, CPU usage, and those sorts of things. When you click in, you get this option here. People often miss this when they sort of come in and they've clicked on another tab and it's sticky. But this is a bunch of quick starts, and utilizing quick starts is a great way to understand how you can use some of the features. In some cases, like notifications hubs or media services, there'll be code in here, and you can grab that code and start utilizing it. If we start clicking across, we've got a dashboard. If we want to, say, go and set up TFS or Git deployments, or reset our deployment credentials so we can connect using FTP, it's just a matter of clicking through these items here. Obviously, there's nothing showing in the monitoring at the moment because we haven't done anything with this. But let's go and hit the QWERTY ASDF site. And there's our initial WordPress site. So let's say tonight I'm definitely going to have many beers. It's been a busy couple weeks. Okay on that? If you have any questions on Azure, feel free to email me. And now we're going to install WordPress, and then this should have our site up and running. But the key thing in that I wanted to show was we've got a gallery, and this is PHP with a MySQL backend. So not something you'd normally hear about running in a Microsoft-based data center. So there's our site. We can log in. And there we go. You've got your standard dashboard. We can come in, create a post, add new. Make it something interesting. Hit publish. Drop out to the main site. And you can see there's our beer o'clock WordPress site running on Windows Azure websites. Pretty cool, right? Nice and fast. So let's jump back now to the Query U1 and have a look how you can deploy an ASP.NET MVC site through Windows Azure. And then we'll look at one of the new monitoring features that we've dropped into the portal here. So the first thing I need to do is essentially download a publish profile. So a publish profile contains the credentials you require to be able to deploy direct to Windows Azure from within Visual Studio. So I've downloaded that. Next thing I need to do is go to Visual Studio, File, New Project. We're going to select Web, ASP.NET MVC 4, and we'll just let it be named that. We're going to do the standard Internet application template. Two things worth going and watching the What's New in ASP.NET session is to see the updates to our actual templating here, which was released in VS 2012. ASP.NET MVC update 2012.2. We've got a new Facebook application template and single page application template there. So they're worth looking at. Looks like I just selected that one, which was not intentional, but we'll just run with it. So this is going to download and install this, or not so much download, but it's going to create this package. And what we're doing is we're actually scaffolding a lot of this solution utilizing NuGet. So you'll notice with a lot of the new stuff with MVC, a number of the packages like EF and those sorts of things are actually dropped in directly using NuGet, and that's part of the model that we're working with going forward in terms of building out solutions within Visual Studio, because it means behind the scenes we can actually go and work on those packages and have a much more frequent release cycle for them rather than having to ship something that bakes straight into VS here. So with this, we can actually grab it. We can select Publish. And you can do it, machine. Come on. You made it through the keynote. Let's see, let's go full power. Sometimes makes a difference. Are you serious? Come on, man. I apologize. I don't really know what's going on with that. Let's we may resort to the standard Visual Studio fix for this, which is kill it and start it again. It's not really going as well as I'd like to, so I do apologize. Where am I going here? Processes, Visual Studio. Let's see. No, you're gone. Okay. Let's get rid of you. Sorry about that. What am I doing? It's interfered with my wushu, man. Let's open this guy up. There we go. Let's try this again. I'm going to build it this time, just for fun. Can't imagine that would be the bug. I think it was just my VS. It's doing something funky. Come on. Yeah, is there a window in the background? That's what I was thinking, right? But I come across, there's a snipping tool, but what the, that is really quite bizarre behavior. Oh, let's do extend mode and see if there's anything like outside of the screen that I can't see. And I think, did I just break that on you guys? And thank you for coming. There we go. Look at that. Magic. How did that happen? I don't know. So this is cool. So it's obviously a modal dialogue. That's good to learn. We can go to downloads here. And where did I drop those publish settings? I can't even remember now. QWERTY hit OK. Now this is pulling in all those credentials and such that we need to deploy to an endpoint, which is our service. Hit next. Now this actually requires a database connection. I missed that when I created the website. I should have come in and rather than doing quick create, I really don't understand why my machine is dying today. It survived the keynote and now it's grinding. I don't know if that's related to network or not. But what I've missed here is quick create just creates a website. Custom create will actually go off and create a website with a DB. And in this case, this template needs a DB. And what the wizard is asking for here is a connection string replacement. And if we had a linked SQL DB, you would actually see that here, and you just select it, and it replaces the connection strings for you. So if you're running on local, it's going to use your local DB or SQL Express. And then as you publish, it's going to pull whatever linked servers you have. So we'll hit next here, and we'll hit publish. And with that, it's going to go off and publish to our website. And we should see here that in 30 seconds or so, it should be deployed. Now, the cool thing about the publish process here is it's actually going to take this first publish, all the assemblies, essentially everything, and deploy it. Our next deployment will just be by difference. So it'll be even faster than what we see here with this particular deployment. We'll give it a few more seconds here. Let's close this guy down. Do it. Yeah, so typically about a minute, I'd say. But really, how long does it normally take you to deploy within your own infrastructure or on some third-party infrastructure? How long does anyone want to throw out some time? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? An hour? No? 2 weeks? Yeah, I've been part of those deployments before. A lot of angry customers calling me as well. So we'll let this run. Let's let this run here while I return to the deck. I think should be. Oh, hold on. There we go. There's that Chrome again. I fully intended on getting rid of that, but hey, sometimes you do need to test across multiple browsers, right? And one of the cool things in Visual Studio here, one of the updates is you can actually go and target your testing to different browsers that you have installed here. If you want to install mobile emulators, if you're doing mobile page-based development for ASP.NET, you can do that too. So this is our first hit, so obviously it's cold, so it's going, and essentially our next hit will be a warm hit, and it'll be a lot faster. So while that is happening, I think what we'll look at is the other thing which I wanted to show you, which is scale. So if we have these websites, right, by default we're running in a shared tier, and the shared tier is restricted to 165 meg of outbound data per day. And if you hit that, you need to then go and move up a tier to shared. And what that gives you is the capability to pay as you exceed that egress bandwidth. So if I wanted to take this free site running in a shared environment to a shared environment where I can actually scale out and do things like add CNAMEs and those sorts of things, I just come across, I hit save, it says, hey, this is going to have a billing impact. So one of the things we're very good about doing is if you're on a free trial or something like that, we'll tell you when it's going to start costing you money, and you're not going to get any surprise bills. So with that, couple seconds and we've ramped up to shared. If we want to ramp across to reserved, hey, we can do that too. Let's put it on 4 medium instances and hit save. And this is part of the power of Windows Azure in terms of being able to scale out your solutions in minimal time. So it really allows you to add burst capacity or scale up when you know there's going to be increased demand for your solutions. So this would be because I didn't have a DB attached, and that was trying to go and scaffold the initial DB using Entity Framework. But even a website with an error on it is a website that's been deployed by someone who probably shouldn't be deploying websites. So with that, let's move on. And our scale out to reserved mode now is done. If we wanted to scale up further, you can. If you want to scale down, you can as well. Hit save, and it's going to go and do that scale out. So to me, that's something that's quite impressive about deploying to the cloud in general, is this idea of being able to have this, infinite for significantly small amounts of infinity. I guess you can't say it's infinite, but it is, for most intensive purposes, infinite. This ability to go and push your solution out across hardware, which traditionally in your own data centers would take time to go out and acquire and install and maintain. So one of the things I like about it. So let's jump back and try and go a bit faster here. For those of you that are new in the room, I'll just point this out because this is sort of cool and it was released yesterday. If we come down here to the Configure tab, if you're running on a shared or reserved instance, you can actually perform monitoring of your web endpoints now. So essentially you can go in and provide a URL on your website, and then that will start doing sort of monitoring of your website to ensure it's up, and you can sort of see, let's go and add one here. So we can say we want to monitor this website from US VA. We'll call this US VA. We can come across, and that's now there. We hit save, and then where this will surface now is within our dashboard. If we come over to our dashboard, this is now going to start performing some monitoring on our site, so we can see the response time from US VA, and it's here somewhere, which I can't really see. We can take some of these guys off. So no data points yet because it hasn't done the first read to see how long does it take to hit it from US to North Europe. But as time progresses, give it 10 minutes, which we don't have to sit here waiting, you'll start seeing that turn up within the portal here. So that's really cool for people who want to see, what's the latency for my users overseas hitting a particular page, and for instance, am I getting, a 404 or something like that when it's trying to hit that page from external places as well. So it's quite useful in that respect. So let's have a little bit of a look of what happened when we were scaling there. So we started out with a shared mode, or a free mode. This slide needs to be a little bit updated because now we have free, shared, reserved. But once we hit shared, we started with 1, and then if we scale that up, it just goes and deploys our solution onto another. This should have a line divider through there. These are 2 separate physical machines, but it'll take our website and deploy it out in a sandboxed environment on a second machine. Then we'll have a load balancer sitting in front of that routes the requests between the 2. So that's the scale for shared. And once we cut across to reserved, what happens is our site goes from this shared multi-tenant type environment or high-density web hosting into its own reserved core, reserved instance of a particular size. We upped that to a medium-sized core, which basically gave it a lot more power. In this case, it's got one website on there, and we can go out and scale that across to have multiple reserved instances. And lastly, if you've got multiple deployments to that one data center, say we had 3 websites in North Europe, it's going to take those 3 and drop them all on that reserved instance. So you're going to get better performance for those websites that have been deployed to that particular data center. So we did that. So what's new for web developers? So there's a whole bunch of new features. For Windows Azure websites, ASP.NET 4.5 support. That's something a lot of people asked for. We dropped that a couple months back into the solution. So you can build solutions on .NET 4.5 and deploy it to Windows Azure websites. We've increased the scale-out options from 6 shared instances or 2 6 shared instances or 10 reserved instances. Before it was about half of that. We've released continuous integration from GitHub, Bitbucket, which I didn't call out in TFS, Node.js, PHP, and Python support if you're developing it. How many people develop in those languages here in the room? One guy? Do you mind if I skip saying that and you can just read those ones? Oh, you're all good. Okay, because we're running low on time. All right, so Visual Studio 2012, we've got a whole bunch of web tooling enhancements that basically make it easy to utilize those stacks, so CoffeeScript, handlebars, JS Renderer, and such. Web API enhancements, we've made significant updates to OData, and we've also baked into the box documentation generation. So if you noted on that website that we had deployed earlier, which had our error on it, there was actually an API link down the bottom, and that's because that particular template had a web API within it. And out of the box now, in the default templates in Visual Studio, we actually go off and we generate, because I scaled out to reserved here now, now it's a cold hit on one of the second reserved instances. But essentially, there's an API link. You click on it, and it shows you your REST API, including sample JSON that you'd use if you're posting entities up to that API or reading entities from it. So I'm not going to wait on that for the few more seconds that it'll take, because I'd like you guys to see some more stuff. So my slide deck doesn't seem to be moving down there. Let's go here. So Signal R now supported as part of ASP.NET. Facebook application template is something new. My colleague who sits in the other side of my office, I'll say it's my office, but it's probably ours, he built that and shipped it in Visual Studio, so it's pretty cool. He's the founder of the C# SDK, so if you've ever done any Facebook development and utilized that, he's the guy who built this template, so you know that it's done right. These are some of the common FAQs on Windows Azure websites. So SSL support. If you noticed, we deployed that to subdomain.azurewebsites.net. Now, that deployment has a wildcard SSL certificate, but most people want to have a CNAME such that you can have, www.mywebsite.com. And then, so we do support CNAMEs and A records on shared and reserved, but still, the one thing that we're missing is essentially SSL support for custom domains. So if you want to have SSL on your www.mysite.com, it's not there today, but in the future, we can't say when, we'll support SNI and IP-based SSL certs. There are solutions now today that you can utilize cloud services and application request routing to push those requests through with an SSL cert to your websites, but they're only really useful for people who are building like hardcore solutions with hundreds of websites on Windows Azure websites. So know that it's coming. If you don't need SSL on your own domain, then you're good. If SSL on a subdomain of Azure websites is okay for you today, then you can use that. Otherwise, if you don't need it, you're good to go. Does it scale? Can it run large workloads? Yes, we certainly have a lot of customers doing millions of requests a day to Windows Azure websites. Can I use my own domain? We talked about that. Can I install custom software? So the answer here is no. If you need to install third-party software on the guest OS, you need to start looking at cloud services or VMs. Can I use WebSockets? At this time, WebSockets isn't supported on websites, but we're working to add that feature into websites as well. So this is mobile services, and I won't go into this because we did it in the keynote, and I've got a session later today. But if you're building a mobile solution for Windows Store apps, phone apps, iOS apps, or Android apps, you should definitely check out mobile services. It lives within the portal right here, the mobile-based item. You can create a backend in about 3 minutes flat and download a sample application that will talk to it. Key features that it provides, apart from client SDKs for all of those platforms, is a REST API. You can write, say, a .NET Micro Framework application that uses this if you wanted to. But the key things out of the box that we provide is structured storage and a cloud backend, server scripts if you want to write custom business validation, auth with popular social identity providers like Twitter, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft account, notifications with all the notification providers for those platforms, APNS for Apple, WNS for Windows, and the others for Android and Windows Phone. We've got a scheduler if you want to run background tasks, like tasks that execute on, say, a 15-minute interval or longer interval. It'll execute script, and you can do whatever you want there. Logging and diagnostics, and also the standard scale story. So let's talk about cloud services. So we just talked about websites and mobile services. They're like, you're just starting with a website or a mobile application, this is what you should start with. If you need more control, and as we go through this deck, it goes from convenience, you could say, to control. As you get more control, you lose convenience because you have to start managing things yourself, and things become a little bit more complicated to understand conceptually, but you do have that control. So cloud services allow you to build scalable apps and services that support multi-tier architectures. And we've also got some automated application management built in within that. So I believe I'm giving you a demo of cloud services. So let's do that. Oh, that's Android. Don't need that guy. Let's close this guy. File, new project. Now, where we just worked with the standard MVC website that you'd use if you're deploying to your own data centers, cloud services, rather than using this template directly, we have our own packaging solution for that. so we can create a cloud service. Now, to get this, you need to install the Azure SDK. It's available on the Downloads button on windowsazure.com. We hit OK. Now, the next thing we do is we choose what do we actually want to be deployed within this cloud service. In this case, I may want an MVC role, and I may want what we call a worker role. So we might want a web tier and perhaps also a worker role. So a worker role is similar to a Windows service. Who's developed a Windows service? Lots of people, right? So you've got a well-defined on start, run, and on stop. A worker role is essentially the same thing, but that's the term we give it for Azure. So you define your on start, your run, and stop, and you set up your run such that it runs, forever at the interval that you want it to perform whatever work. So typically used for decoupling solutions. So you may have a web tier that's writing to a queue, and then a worker role that reads from that queue. You can then scale out your web tiers independently to your worker role. So if you know you've got, say, a ticketing solution, and you're going to get slammed because a popular band is coming on, you can scale out your web tier. That'll write to your queues, and then you can perhaps say, well, it may not be important for you to process these items in the queue very fast, so you just leave maybe 2 instances of your worker role running. Perhaps then, the manager says, hey, we need all these processed in 2 hours. You just scale that out to however many instances you need to clear the backlog. So let's hit OK on this. So you'll see, though, that it's tying in. Whilst we've got a different deployment model, we're still using the same assets. In this case, I'm going to use an MVC application here, and that's going to be for our web role. Now, web roles provide hooks for you to do things to the underlying guest OS. So if you wanted to install, say, URL rewriting or something like that into IIS, you can actually script that and have that run on what's called a startup task. And that's part of the power of utilizing cloud services, web roles, and worker roles. Basically that control. So if we look at the layout here, you've got your standard web project. We've got a worker role. If we look at the worker role and come down, we've got our run, our on start, and on stop is just another override on role entry point. And then the thing that's different really is this here, and this is our cloud service project. And you can see this project consists of our web and worker role. Now, we can actually go off and do a whole bunch of things to configure this. We can go down, we can add settings like connection strings and those sorts of things. We can add endpoints, HTTPS endpoints. So if you've got a custom domain and you want to add HTTPS, you can do that in a web role today. If you want to use TCP or UDP, if you're doing gaming solutions, you can add public endpoints just basically by adding items through this drop-down. They can be internal, they can be external, or an instance input if you want to target a particular instance of your deployment. So that's that. Worker role is here as well. One of the cool things that's recently GA'd is caching. So you can actually utilize, let me term this correctly. There's 2 ways to run caching. So caching basically in memory. Long day, I got up at like 2 o'clock. Sorry. Okay. Let me say it like this. If you're doing product lookups and those types of things, hitting disk is an expensive operation. If you're constantly hitting your SQL DBs, caching is a way to actually cache that data in memory. So you read that data once, put it in memory, and then as you're trying to request that data every time, you're actually hitting memory rather than physical disk, and it's quite fast. Now, caching in Windows Azure provides 2 ways to utilize it. One is a co-located role where it uses unused capacity in terms of your RAM on that instance. You can scale out here to say that you want to use, say, 20, 30, 50% of RAM on that instance. Or you can use a dedicated role if you want to, say, deploy a worker role, and all that is doing is being a caching node. What this allows you to do is to stitch together a very large distributed cache. So you could create, say, a 40 gig cache if you wanted to using this mechanism. So let me hit run on this. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell me I need to be in admin mode, run as administrator. So what's sort of different about, let me close that guy. What's sort of different about cloud services compared to websites is when you run websites, say you're deploying that locally to IIS or whatnot, IIS Express, With this, with cloud services, we're actually emulating Windows Azure to a degree in terms of its deployment model. So if I wanted to come here and say for my web role, I want perhaps say 2 instances of small, and my worker role, perhaps I want 3. I hit save, I hit run, and this now will spin up a local emulator which you can use for debugging. So I'll show you that you'll see that there's worker roles running, and you'll see them hitting the run, then it'll be sleeping, run, sleeping, and the web tier will also be scaled out across multiple instances locally behind your local IIS. So this is really, it's not an exact fit to what you'd experience when you're deploying these solutions to Azure. Certainly there's some differences. It's very hard to emulate that entire environment, but it does give you something that's sort of close that allows you to deal with these web farm type scenarios where you need to deal with scale and stateless web roles and those sorts of things. So down here you'll see that it's got our compute emulator and such started. So let me show you the compute emulator here. So if we expand this out, you'll see that we've got 2 web roles. They're still coming online, still doing some work there. We've got 3 worker roles as well. And this will allow us to basically see what's happening or being written to our traces within those roles. So role busy, role state started, calling on start, and then soon we'll say calling run, and then you'll see that the worker roles will just keep on running and the web roles will keep running as well. But that's sort of what's sort of different about websites. You're just deploying to something that's already there, whereas cloud services, you're packaging a solution, deploying it, then we're provisioning the resources for you. So let's return to the deck here quickly. Right, so this is what happened. We took or created a package in Visual Studio, and we run it locally, but if you were to deploy this to Azure, it's got the same publish experience that we have for website, or very similar. You publish it to a cloud services slot. What happens then is we provision role instances based on the instance count that you wanted for that package. In this case, on the slides, it said we want 4. So they're found within our data center, and they're not being used by someone else unless you're deploying to an extra small instance, in which case you're on a shared core. We then go and deploy that package that we created. So that was our package definition, which we've seen, which had our web and worker role. And then once that's completed, we spin up a load balancer, and then we start routing requests to those instances, and we'll round robin in the requests. If you've got, say, a web tier with more than one instance, it'll be spread across all of them. So let's say now that one of those machines dies. That does happen. Hardware does fail. We'll detect that. Our Azure Fabric Controller will detect it. It'll spin up a new instance, deploy your package, and route the traffic via the load balancer to that particular resource. So that's managed for you. The interesting thing or useful thing about this, or what you should take away, is you need a minimum of 2 instances to ensure that you receive that SLA. Because if you've only got 1, there's going to be downtime. If you've got 2, while that one's down and we're pulling up the other one, all your requests are going to be going to the one that's still up there. So cloud services management, we'll skip that because we started a bit late today. Let's talk about what's new in cloud services. So we recently released support for Windows Server 2012, labeled as Guest OS Family 3, and we added support for .NET 4.5 in web and worker roles. Caching reached GA. That was the caching block which I showed you. We added UDP support back in, I think it was November or September last year. So now you've got the full HTTP, HTTPS, TCP, and UDP. We've got a streamlined publishing experience within Visual Studio. We've also got deployment time improvements compared to what they were a year ago, if we're going to benchmark. So let's talk about virtual machines. So now we're going from convenience. Then we've hit cloud services, which, there's a little bit more there that you need to do, but you're not exactly having to go and remote desktop to that machine to configure things. You can script most of it. Virtual machines, you've got full control of the OS. Typically, you deploy it using an image, and then you remote desktop in and do whatever configuration and management you want. So we support Windows Server and Linux workloads. So that's our flexible workload support, and we've also got VPN capability. So if you want to create, say, a subnet in Windows Azure of machines that can join your actual domain via a VPN device, you can configure that within the Windows Azure portal and essentially bridge your on-prem with Windows Azure. So Virtual machines in Windows Azure are, of course, portable, so the standard VHD file type there that we've got, that's each of those little blocks here. If we say we've got one in your on-prem data center and you want to move that workload to Azure, it's just a matter of uploading that disk image and then spinning it up. Likewise, you can pull them down and drop them back into your own data center if you want. Alternatively, if you like, but I would frown upon it, you could go and push them over to someone else. But the key thing is here that there's no lock-in, and that's one of the reasons why I'd encourage you to check out, if you're doing a lot of virtualization on-prem today and you want to look at this, check out Windows Azure. You should be able to take what you've got and push it up with minimal constraints. What's actually happening under the hood with that disk, though, is when we push that up to Azure, it's using Windows Azure Storage. So that's actually replicated across essentially three backups of that one disk. If that were to fail on one of those, you've still got the other two, plus we take an image and restore it into the third. So you've got some redundancy there locally, but additionally, so reliable always on, but additionally what we do is we continuously geo-rep that image from, say, West US data center across to East US data center. If you deployed in West, that is, we typically something 500 miles away. If you're sort of thinking about, I need a DR scenario here where something, catastrophic may potentially happen, I still want that data stored, a very long way away. So that's a feature of Windows Azure Storage, which you can turn on with a tick. So quite cool for those sort of scenarios. So let's talk a bit. Did I miss a demo? Amazing. Here we go. Let me just point out, this is cloud services. So we won't do a deployment to that because it takes a little longer. I will, however, show you virtual machines because a lot of people use them. To create a new virtual machine, new compute virtual machine, two options, quick create or from gallery. Let's go from gallery. So you can choose a standard platform image here. If you uploaded your own images, this was me a long time ago trying to get Windows 8 release preview running up there, but we won't talk about that. But essentially in the platform images that come out of the box, the one thing that I wanted to point out here is you can bring your own, and that's what this one basically is. Platform images, choose one as a baseline, and then start working from there. So you can see BizTalk Server 2013 Beta, SQL Server 2012 SP1, Windows Server 2008 R2, and then some Linux workloads here. So if I wanted to go and deploy one of these guys, I just select it, and I start clicking through the wizard. I think this is a Linux workload, so I don't normally provision these. But if you want to upload an SSH key, you can utilize that to SSH to the box. Standalone virtual machine or connect to an existing virtual machine. So if you've defined a subnet using virtual networks, you can actually have machines dropped into the same subnet. Typically used if you want to, say, do something like SQL mirroring or something like that. We provide a DNS name, so something public that we can access this from. Why would anyone ever take QWERTY as a name? All right, there we go. Hit next. Availability sets, so split them across separate fault domains and upgrade domains. So if we're rolling out updates across our data center, only one will be teared down, the other one will be safe. Fault domain-wise, if one of our big blocks of hardware fails, you've still got it across another availability set. Hit OK. That will go off and deploy it. It takes a little while, but just to demonstrate the full control here, what we're going to do is we're going to RDP into the desktop of this Windows one I created earlier. Door. Password, bang, hit OK. A little slow, but we'll get there. Hit yes. And while that's going, let's go and do something like let's attach an empty disk. This is one of the other great things about it. If you need more space, well, you just go out and create a disk, which will be automatically attached to your VM if that ever connects. So let's do this while we wait. If you wanted to do a terabyte, you could. I'll just go for 100 gig. Hit OK. That'll go off and create that. And then now we're in here. Once that's finished creating, we should be able to refresh this. So it's, Windows Server 2012. Just log in and do your own thing, manage it. That's what VMs are about, giving you that full control. If we hit refresh on this guy, let's give it a few seconds, and we'll see how quickly you get a 100 gig disk. Wait on that guy. I created a 10 gig one before. It was only 30, 40 seconds. But I think you get the drift. If you need more resource, you just add it, and it will be there. You then, format that disk however you want it and assign it a drive, and then you can start utilizing it. So that is VMs for you. I'll leave this go. We may return to it, but I'd like to ensure Scott gets to talk to you guys about SQL workloads within Windows Azure. So let's fast-pace ourselves there. Building blocks, we talked a lot about core services. There's other building blocks that you build solutions on. Database, storage, mobile services, caching, service bus, Windows Azure AD, media services, CDN, networking. These are all things. To try and cover them all in one session is crazy. Windows Azure Storage essentially provides us a highly scalable storage platform that you can go out and utilize to deploy blobs, which is any binary data, be it image assets, videos, documents. We've got tables, which provide essentially structured storage, but similar to NoSQL. There's no concept of foreign key relationships that you have in SQL Server, so not to be confused. And we've also got the capability to continuously geo-rep, as we saw before. Some of the recent updates here, we introduced a flat network storage architecture in 2012. We released Storage Client Library 2, which has a whole bunch of improvements from a developer perspective of utilizing storage. Essentially makes it easier, adds a whole bunch of async stuff and support for shared access signatures. The big thing for people developing high throughput solutions is if you've created a storage account post June 7th, 2012, essentially rather than having a transaction sort of somewhat rough limitation of 5,000 transactions a second on a storage account, we've basically increased that by 4. So now you can perform 20,000 transactions a second against, say, a table, a message, a queue, or blob. If we look over at the right, these are some of the things you sort of need to consider if you're building a solution on this. A single queue is similar to a table partition in that a single queue is limited to 2,000 messages per second. So if you wanted to hit 20,000 transactions a second for your storage account just on queues, you'd need up to 10 queues in this case to hit that. For tables, you're petitioning by the petition key. So a single petition key can have 2,000 entities per second. So when you're defining those petition keys in your solutions, pay attention to how you're actually utilizing your petition key and make sure you're using a good petitioning scheme because it results in better scale out. And blob-wise, essentially the container name plus blob name is your petition key for a blob, and you can get up to 60 meg a second coming out of that. So we'll skip the storage demo because I'd like Scott to come up and talk about SQL.
Hey everybody.
I wasn't bowing, but I was looking for the switch. But thank you.
All right, so we got just a few minutes, and I don't have the cool Australian accent Nick has, so we'll do this really quick. So I got about 5 minutes to do to SQL Azure. So SQL people in the audience, anybody? All right, the rest of you can leave. No, I'm kidding. All right, so what I want to do is, we need to move over here. Perfect. Okay. So what I want to show you is simply a quick demo on how to use Windows Azure SQL Database, or SQL Database for short. Let me log in here. So what we're going to do is so we talked about Azure Storage, blobs and tables, things like that. Tables are a NoSQL scenario, key value pair. They're not relational. Our Windows Azure SQL Database is our relational store. It is SQL Server as a service. So you get all the great benefits of SQL Azure, or Windows Azure SQL Database: tables, views, stored procedures, triggers, primary keys, foreign keys, indexes, all that great stuff. So what I'm going to do is show you how to spin up a new Windows Azure SQL Database server, create a database, a little quick migration, and then if we have time, we may do some reporting or data sync. So Nick showed you the portal. So here's my portal, and the node we're going to work with is this one down here, SQL Database. Right there, our SQL Database node. And so if we go into that, we're going to click on servers, and I've got several servers. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to provision a new server. So how long does it typically take you to provision a new SQL Server box on-prem? Right? Depends if you have the box already, right? But anywhere between several hours to a couple weeks. But like you've seen with the rest of the demos, I can quickly and easily provision a new box. It's just a matter of seconds. So I'm going to say, give it a login name, and this is our, much like SA, and give it a password. And just say, oh, I typed that in wrong. Let's start that over. And then we're going to say, we're going to put this in the North Europe, and done. So within just a couple of seconds, I've provisioned a Windows Azure SQL Database server. Now, it's not a physical box, and if we want to talk about that, it's really just a TDS endpoint. But already, there's my box. I'm already done. So there's my North Europe. Now, we're very at Microsoft, we're very serious about the security of your data, because we're saying take your data and host that in one of our data centers. We want you to be comfortable and confident that your data is very secure. So notice that I couldn't name my server, so I couldn't name it things like Batman or Superman or Dilbert or things like that, right? It gave me a name. So what I want to do now is connect to this through Windows Azure, through SQL Server Management Studio. So if I go into here, I want to grab the server name, and notice that my server name is this, right there. That's my server name, manage URL. So I need to grab that. I'm going to open SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to connect to that. So I'm going to paste that in, and it is SQL authentication. So I'm going to type in pop quiz, is this going to connect or not? And the answer is no. And the reason, the question is why? Why could I not connect to this server that I've already provisioned? That's because we're very serious about securing your data. So I did give it a username, I did give it a password, but in order for me to connect to even the server in the database that I created, I have to provision and specify who has access to that. And that's done back in the portal. So if I go back to this server, I go to configure, you have to specify who has access through IP address. And you can tell Microsoft thought about this because we tell you what your IP address is. You don't have to go figure it out. So I have to basically create what's called a firewall rule to say who has access to this server in this database. And we have firewall rules both at the server level and the database level. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to call this test. So you can have up to 255 rules. I'm going to give this. It could be a start IP address. It could be an IP address range, right? Or you can just specify the same one, which I'm going to do here, and click save. And there's my IP address, right? That's my firewall rule that allows me access to this server. So now I should be able to go back here and click connect. If I type my IP address in right, oh, so I didn't type my password right. Done. Now I have access to that, right? So we're very conscious about what you have. So if someone wants access to your server or your database, you have to give them access to that. So if someone wants to break in, so getting access to your data is almost impossible. They need to know your username, your password, your server name, and your IP address. Or you specifically have to give them access. So getting access to your data is almost impossible. So what I've done is I've created a server. Creating a database is just as easy. I can go in here and say, there's my server. Go into databases, create a database. So I'm going to call this, let's call this Contoso real quick. We have Web Edition and Business Edition. Those are functionally the same. The only difference is the size. For Web, I get 1 and 5. For Business, I get 110 to 150. We create a simple 1 gig database, click OK, done. There's my database. So I've created it in just a matter of about 30 seconds. I've created a server, configured it for security, and then created a database, right? So really quickly, what I want to do now is say, okay, well, how do I take my on-prem database and migrate that to Windows Azure SQL Database? So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to connect. I've got my local server here. I'm going to take this Contoso expense database, and I'm going to migrate that to a new database on that same server. And it's really awesome because I can right mouse click in my SQL Server Management Studio. And if you're running SQL Server 2012, anybody, I can tasks. Do you see that? Deploy database to SQL Azure. We can't make it any more simpler for you, right? It's simple. So I'm going to just say deploy database to SQL Azure. Whoops, where'd my menu go? And I'm going to connect to that new server I just provisioned, which is, oh, not that one. Let's go back to, real quick. Yep. I think I connected to that one. So let me do this again. So tasks, deploy database SQL Azure, connect, go in here, log in. And notice I don't have to, it's going to create the database for me. I don't have to give it, I can call this whatever. I'm just going to call this Contoso expense or Contoso expense 1. It really doesn't matter. Next, and done. And just in just a matter of minutes, it's going to take this database, deploy it from on-prem to Windows Azure SQL database. My deployment's already done. Now, this is a very small database. It's only going to take maybe about 30 seconds or something. But at that point, we're already done. All right. So I've created in just a matter of a minute or two, I've created a server, specified who has access to the server, and right now it's just me. Created a database, and then I took it in an on-prem database and migrated that to Windows Azure SQL database. Now at this point, there's other services, and I don't know how much time we have. Do you want to get into data sync?
Up to the audience. I'm not sure what's next, and I think we've hit. There's a break for hours.
Yeah. So we started 15 late. It's up to you guys. If you want to see some more cool stuff, we can. So if you don't want to,
after this we get into karaoke and.
If you don't, it's okay to leave. You won't get in trouble. I can actually come out and answer any questions that you may have while Scott demonstrates some maybe data sync or reporting features.
Yeah. So you guys want to see some data sync stuff? Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. So notice my database. It's done. Is it done? Yeah, so my migration is done. So within just a matter of seconds, I migrated that database. So now what I'm going to do is say, okay, I've got here on this server now, I should have, refresh, I should have two databases, right? So I've got my Contoso and Contoso expense. My Contoso database is empty because it was a brand new one. My Contoso expense is the one I just migrated to. Anybody, SQL people, has anybody set up replication? Has anybody lost hair over setting up replication? Okay, beat their head against the wall, going, "Oh, that's so hard!" Right? All right. So one of the services around SQL Database is what's called SQL Data Sync, the ability for you .NET people, sync framework. We built this entire topology, SQL Data Sync, on top of the sync framework, and easily, without writing any code, do data synchronization. Right? So let me show you how to do that, and that's right here in the portal. So I'm going to go back here and go to my databases. And notice down here in the portal, I've got this data sync. I'm going to add a new sync group. What I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to synchronize data from the database that we migrated to the database that we just created that's empty, right, with no code, and in about 20, 30 seconds, okay? So I'm going to say new sync group, and I'm going to call the sync group TechDays Belgium. I'm going to put this in the North Europe data center as well, and the reason we want to do that is because you want to keep your services in the same data center, because any data that leaves the data center you get charged for, but as long as it stays in the same data center, it's fine. So we're going to put everything in the same data center. SQL Data Sync is hub and spoke. So what's my master database and where are my member databases? So I'm going to choose a hub database, my master database, and this is my Contoso expense database, the one that we brought in. The username and password. And since this is based on the sync framework, we get all the benefits of the sync framework. We get conflict resolution, we get logging, all that great stuff. So I'm going to say hub wins, I want that my master. From a conflict resolution, click next, and then say what's my reference database? What are the member databases that I want to sync to? So I'm going to pick the Contoso one that we just created empty through the portal. Same thing. It's all on the same server. And well, I want bi-directional sync, meaning I could no matter where I make that change, I'm good to go. So I can click OK, and so it's going to create my sync hub. So if I go over to my sync tab, I'll see this new my new sync group. So it's provisioned, but it says not ready, right? So what I need to go into here is I need to go into here and say, I can configure this to say I can have automatic synchronization, or I can do manual synchronization, things like that. But what I would do is I have to specify the sync rules, meaning what data do I want to synchronize? So I don't have a sync rule, so I'm just going to say new sync. I'm going to use Contoso expense. Done. And to say, well, what data do I want to synchronize? So I'm going to just do the expense report one, and what columns do I want to synchronize? And I'm going to say, which is awesome, if I select, let me scroll up here, this table here, whoop, where'd it go? I can say select all columns from all tables. I'm just going to select a few columns here, down here. Done. Click save. Now it's saving that sync rule, and at this point I can also go in here and I can actually apply filters as well. Maybe I don't want all the column or all the rows in this table synchronized. Maybe I want to apply a filter to say, okay, only if I want to do like geo-replication of data, only sync maybe Europe data from this database to this base. So I can actually apply filters to the data that I get synchronized. So that's all done. Okay, and so at this point I'm all ready to go. I can just say sync. Okay, so I can actually go back out here to my database now, and notice there's no tables. But now notice that it's starting to sync. So it's basically, since it's based on the, let me scroll up here so you guys can see that. Right, so there's all my data. That was a brand new empty database that you saw we created, empty. So at this point, if I go back to the portal, it should say all done. Logs, there's my logs. Come on, here we go. So Contoso sync completed, already done. So I can go back here, go to this table that was just created, and say expense report. And notice that in just a matter of not even 2 seconds, it synced 1,000 rows from one database. Now the databases were in the same data center, so not that bad. But again, just a matter of about 2 seconds, it synchronized 1,000 rows between two databases, right? And how easy was that? No code, just click, 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 done, right? I can apply filters and things like that. Awesome, isn't it? So for those people that are the replication, like, where was this earlier, right? So this is awesome. Yay, thank you. Okay, yeah, yay. All right, one last thing, and what's great about this, since it's built on the sync framework, so you can scale this too, just like everything else. If I want, if I want to scale my database, I can scale my database. I can scale my sync server, things like that. I can say I want multiple instances of this. It's awesome. Okay, and lastly, if you notice that recently, if you were following Scott Goo's blog, they just added SQL reporting. Any BI people here? Okay, just a few of you. So it's SQL Server reporting services. We said we want to give you that same rich reporting capabilities in the cloud. So what we did is we took Windows Azure SQL Server reporting services and made that available as a service as well. So I can go in and I can create a new SQL reporting, go add a new SQL reporting server. The great thing is that it doesn't change the tools that you use to create and view your reports doesn't change. You still open SQL Server Data Tools or BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio, right, to provision your report server. And so I can say new reporting, quick create, give it a service name, call this TechDays BE report. Call this report. Do I have a space? Oh, you're right. Days BE report. Right. We'll basically create this in the same place. North Europe. Administrator. What do I do there? Right, and then create reporting server. At this point, I'm provisioned a reporting server, and I can still use the same tools to provision my reports, deploy my reports. The only difference is when I deploy my reports, instead of specifying the on-prem report server, I'm specifying this new report server. Here's one I've already provisioned. So there is my, let's go in here. So you can same thing. Look at I can look at the execution logs. I can see metrics on how many reports have been viewed, things like that. I can define users. The only difference is that I'm saying where am I deploying my reports to. All right, so I'm 10 minutes over. So if we have any questions, I'll be down here with Nick to talk about data, storage tables, things like that. But thank you very much.
Very cool.